Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. We're so glad that you joined us for another episode. Happy to have you. My name is Patrick Lyons. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm here with one of my favorite people in the universe, Patsy Feeman. Patsy, welcome to you.
Thank you. Delighted to have Scott joining us today.
Yes. And see, you just tipped your hand.
I know.
And our third partner in crime, Leb Tannenbaum. Leb, welcome to you. And I'm going to turn it over to you and let you introduce our guest for the day.
Thank you. Well, we are, the three of us are excited to have Scott Landis with us. Scott is a business coach, a trainer, an author, and a speaker. He's a certified professional coach and specializes in relationship intelligence and fulfillment coaching. He's an entrepreneur with Awakened Life coaching and training. He is capable, very capable, of working with CEOs and leaders within their business. And Scott and his wife, Tanya, often join together to offer professional certified coaching with individual leaders and couples to help them find ultimate fulfillment. We know that success, this is a quote from Scott, we know that success without fulfillment is not success. True fulfillment is making a lasting and meaningful contribution to something you care deeply about. So it is with great pleasure that we welcome Scott Landis to the Frustrated CEO podcast. And Scott, just to kind of kick things off, one of the things, I'm a big fan of distinctions, and you drew a distinction that really caught my eye, which is this distinction between success and fulfillment. And I wondered if you could kind of kick us off and help our listeners understand, what does that distinction mean to you and in the way that you work with people?
Well, thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate it. And that question is actually a great question to start off with, because it's pretty much been my obsession for the last 10 years. About 10 years ago is kind of where I discovered that distinction, because it was before that. I've been an entrepreneur since 2001, and the first 01 to 2012 was all about going after success, air quotes, success. Being a goal-oriented person, a goal crusher, and that's all I knew to do. I set goals. I said, okay, this year I'm going to make this much money, and then I would do everything I could to make that much money and accomplish the goal that I set out. And so, technically having success. And I thought that I didn't really have a distinction between that and fulfillment. But what ended up happening as I got into real estate investing was one of the ventures that I was a part of. And with 0809 crash went down with all that, we lost everything. So we had a financial devastation that, frankly, we're still kind of working our way out of. It was so bad 10 years later, more than 10 years later. And so here I was in 2009, loving entrepreneurship, loving goal crushing, but feeling like that led me astray and not knowing what else to do. Because after you get a taste of entrepreneurship, it's sort of hard to go back to the corporate life that I had before. I couldn't see it, right? I couldn't see going to work for a corporation. So I didn't really know what to do, because my goal crushing, got me into trouble. And anyway, so long story short, I floundered for a few years. 2012 was a time where, my brand's called Awakened Life. And it's called that because in 2012 is when I had somewhat of an awakening, a spiritual awakening, and a connection between purpose, purpose, passion, living a life of fulfillment, and business. So I guess what I figured out then is that there is a purpose, an individual purpose to my life, and it can be most fulfilling, in the most fulfilling way you can live that out in your business. That idea hadn't occurred to me before then. And so, like I said, for the last 10 years, I've been obsessed with, okay, that if that's true, how to live this out. And that's brought me in my coaching practice to work with clients on that, business owners, and so I've learned a few things along the way. But I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of where I got started with that obsession of the distinction you mentioned.
Oh, wow.
So if a new client calls you, or somebody, not a new client yet, but they call and they're not feeling that. I mean, each of us has worked with CEOs who are struggling with exactly that, feeling like they're going to work every day. They're important. They're not important. They're critical to running this organization. Everybody looks to them, but there is a disconnect between what they do for a living and maybe what they, a core purpose, or what they want to do for a living. So when you get a call from that person who hears Scott's the guy who can help me fix that, where do you start? But because I'd imagine most of our listeners aren't, if they're in that place, they're not thinking, well, I'll just quit and go do something that more aligned. Sometimes you feel stuck. Where do you start if that's, if there's a listener today who feels that disconnect?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I guess the thing that I really discovered, the key tipping point that I discovered in 2012, and that I have that conversation with people that call me, is a lot of times they're calling me like, Scott, I don't know what to do. Here's the situation. What do I do? What do I do? And I'll say, well, what if we ask the question, instead of what do you do, let's ask the question, who are you? And to me, that is the key distinguishing question. And then that question is like, not easily answerable. Or what do you mean? Well, who am I? Then we go into identity, which leads to purpose. So your purpose is founded on your identity, who you are. And then okay, so how do I figure out who my identity, who I am? And I look at the design, right? So I often, people that know me hear me say this. I have this clock on the wall story I tell. So like over on the wall is this beautiful, ornate clock. And it's actually a piece of art, right? It's so beautiful and ornate. And obviously whoever designed that clock spent a lot of time on it. And no pun intended there, but they worked really hard to make it beautiful. It is a work of art. And if the clock is not powered, it might tell the right time. It might do what it was designed to do, a couple times a day for a minute. But if it's not powered, it's just art. Even though, not just art, but even though it was designed to be functional as a clock, it's just being art. So I kind of I looked at myself back in 2012 that way. I look at people that I work with that way, and I say, okay, we can tell what you're meant to do by your design. And there's specific ingredients to that, right? When you look at that clock, you can say, oh, wow, it's got indicators that show me, markers of at least 12 and 3 and 6 and 9. I mean, there's indicators. It's got these two hands that are, one's longer than the other. It's a clock. And so there's clues in the design of a clock, and there's clues in the design of each individual that I encounter that which are, what is easy for you? Your gifting, what gets you excited? What gets you passionate? What makes you angry? What are the things that light you up? What happens that comes naturally to you? What's easy for you that's hard for everyone else? Those are the clues to your design. And if you are designed, by the way, there's a designer implied, right? But we don't have to go there if we don't want to. We can, but you are evidently designed, and those gifts, skills, and abilities are your clues to that design. And once you say, okay, I know what this clock is supposed to do. It's supposed to tell time 24 hours a day, not just twice a day. Let's power this thing up. Let's put the juice behind it. And all of a sudden it starts acting like it was designed. And that's where the fulfillment comes from. Like when you just get in line with what you were designed to do, your purpose, people call that flow.
Mhm.
There's definitely energy behind it, right?
Mhm. Mhm. That's a great story. I really, I can connect with that story. Um, so I have another question along those lines. I'll use myself as an example. There have been times when I have felt successful and fulfilled,
Mm.
and there have times when I have felt pretty successful, but not as fulfilled. And I don't think I'm probably alone with that.
Mm.
So is there also something about like the cycle of life or the phase that you're in that you identify when you work with clients um, to help them marry that success and fulfillment?
Yeah, sure. So like you're talking about, different seasons of life or
Mhm.
ups and downs, ebbs and flows of business life cycle, or, where you are in, you just have newborn kid, you've got teenager, you got empty nest, like all those different things, right? You're talking
Yeah.
about different levels of fulfillment throughout that.
Yeah. Even the stories that you shared right in the beginning to me kind of represented
Hmm.
at this phase of my life. I couldn't even identify fulfillment, but I was driven to succeed. And
Hmm.
maybe then, yeah, okay, the business economy impacted that, but you probably would have come up short at some point anyway
Hmm.
and said,
Yeah.
is this really fulfilling? Is this what I'm really passionate about?
Yeah. It's interesting because I do think there's a distinction between like achievement and fulfillment, right? So
Mm,
if you make whatever you think is a lot of money, if you make a lot of money, but you don't feel connected to a purpose, then that's not going to feel fulfilling. On the other hand, if you're short of what you believe to be a lot of money, if you're not quite there yet, I would describe myself as I'm still digging out of that financial ruin from 0809, this much, further down the road. So I'm not quite where I want to be on a financial level, but I've never been more fulfilled, more passionate, more purpose led. And So I think to your question, Leb, if it's different levels of achievement, you can have tough times and you can have great times. Uh, and purpose or fulfillment is sort of a separate rail than that. Um,
mm,
it
mm,
seems to be independent. When you know that you're on in alignment with that purpose and living it out and and that's where that fulfillment comes from. Uh, the ups and the downs there, you just feel like it's a part of the journey. You can be more present. You
mm,
don't There's more contentment in it, right? uh, they talk about peace in the midst of storms, like even when you just know that you're on point with what you're set out to do, when you feel that connection to purpose and you're living that out. um, Even in the midst of a storm or a devastation, it could be a loss of a family member or a health thing. There's still a connection to purpose in that, and that's again, I think I keep using purpose and fulfillment interchangeably because I can't disconnect them, but I definitely can disconnect the achievement from it.
So we live in certainly American business climate where success is the end all be all. It's the driver. It's like what leaders are supposed to do. They're supposed to crush those goals and lead to
Hmm.
success.
Hmm.
And I know certainly with some of the leaders we've talked to, and maybe some of the people listening to the podcast, when I ask them or we ask them about purpose or fulfillment, sometimes I get just an absolute blank stare. Like I, you know, I, so I'm curious how you help people bridge that gap.
Hmm. Yeah, so like the blank stare is, what do you mean? My purpose is to grow the bottom line. That's what I
Yes,
do, right? I'm a CEO.
exactly.
My board, that's what they want to see. That's what the shareholders want to see. Grow the bottom line. That's what I do. That's my purpose. There's nothing else, on my radar.
Yes, yes.
So what do
Until
you mean this other thing? Like, okay, so yeah, and I would say, I'd say probably a lot of us can relate to that. I definitely could. Like, that's the only metric I had was I'm either on track or off track with my goals. Um, and when you're in the middle of that, and I guess before I had a reason to even consider these things, that was it. I didn't necessarily question if I was on purpose or not, or if I was feeling fulfilled. But I think what comes up is if there is, I guess it happens when there's a little setback. Like I mentioned, a death in the family, a family illness, my marriage is strained, the relationship, my spouse is saying, you work too much. When some kind of tension or rub comes up, I think that's when it comes to the surface. And if you start to feel a lack, I often say that if you're experiencing anxiety, stress, worry, and sleepless nights, those are symptoms of being out of alignment with your purpose, which is, again, disconnect from a fulfilled life. If those things start to come up, then that's when, it really becomes important to have that conversation. But if you've got a listener, if somebody's listening and they're saying, you know what, I don't have anything going on right now, I don't need this, I don't need to know about this. Well, I might just caution that person to maybe take a look at it, because this is a stuff happens, right? Life happens. If you either had a tragedy or had a challenge or about to go into one or right in the middle of one, right? So when those times happen, if you're in the middle of like everything's just going and going and going, it's great. It might be a good time to, get ahead of the game and really connect with the purpose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what I was actually thinking of, Scott, when you were answering the question, talking about the difference between the distinction between achievement and fulfillment or purpose. And I'm right there with you. We're very aligned in a lot of our passions. And I also often use those words interchangeably. But what I was thinking about was, and then you talked about how some of the signs or where we can get out of balance is in those home relationships. That's something I think that we all hear in conversations with the CEOs we talk to and work with. I know that's something that our listener can connect to and relate to. At least a lot of them can connect to and relate to, is all of this achievement at work, and then you get out of balance at home. And Lev often says, if it's not working at home, it's not working. That's like his go-to, which just always resonates with me. But to me, I think that it's part of my own story. I have this story that I hate to tell it because it just exposes when I was workaholic, but I'll tell it anyway. I was in the middle of this 4-month-long project at work, working, literally 20-hour days. There were nights that I slept in the office. I was leading a team of 25 people, and it was just this 4 months. We needed to complete the work in order literally to like keep the business from going under. And in the middle of this 4-month project, my phone rang once, and I could see caller ID. It was my best friend. He was the best man at my wedding. And I almost didn't answer it because I was so busy, but I answered, and I picked up the phone and I said, "Hey, Rudy, what's up? I got like 30 seconds. And he said, "No, I just called to see how you're doing." And I'm thinking, I don't have time for this. I was like, "I'm good. Can I call you another time?" And he said, "Yeah, I just want to remind you that today is your wife's birthday."
Ooh.
And I had gotten up in the morning and kissed her goodbye and left for work. And not only didn't I remember it was her birthday, I didn't even see it coming. And here's my best friend call. And do you know what I did? I felt I felt really, really small, felt horrible, but I was chasing achievement at work at the expense of fulfillment at home, and absolutely out of whack. And you know what's interesting, because all of that chasing achievement, I thought, this is what I have to do. I have no choice. And yet the moment I got that phone call, you know what I did? I went in and I told my boss, "I'm leaving. I have to go. Like, I really screwed up and I have to leave." So to your point, it wasn't until things got really out of whack that I was faced with the reality of my choices and this realization, instant realization, I'm chasing achievement at the expense of fulfillment. And in fact, so here I'll lob this to you and let you share your story, because I know you're pretty open about this. You have a similar story, right? Where your relationship kind of became rocky for, I don't know, similar reasons, different reasons, but I think it's a good lesson for the CEO. Don't wait until you get that phone call, right? Don't wait or until you get served to wake up and realize, fulfillment has to be part of the equation.
Yeah, boy, that story. I haven't had that exact situation, but it definitely hits home with me. I feel like it could be just because of the people that I tend to work with, but I feel like if you're running a business, you're married, you have kids at home, you're feeling some level of guilt of failure. Like, if any, again, maybe there's people out there that I haven't met, but the ones that I tend to meet are the ones who are like, we're cognizant of, I'm messing it up somewhere, or at least if I'm not aware of it, I'm thinking that's probably happening. But most of us are like, yeah, I know specifically I let my daughter down. I know specifically I forgot my wife's birthday. I'm also like, I messed that up at work. And you're just feel like you're always, well, you're a frustrated CEO, right? You're just, there's always something that you're trying to keep all the plates spinning and juggle all the balls, but ultimately something's gonna go. And that's I think when you told that story, it really got me at my heart, because I'm like, I know I haven't had that exact failure, but I probably had at least one worse, if not the same, right? So yeah, I mean, it's just that's where it is. I mean, how do you do it all? And that's again what I'm obsessed with, like how do we make this work?
So okay, and I'm thinking about the call that I got from my friend, right? He saved me that day, probably saved my relationship. I know you are passionate about community. It's part of the answer. Talk about the importance of community. We just did an episode. The last episode was about CEOs needing to stay connected, needing to not go it alone. Let's talk about how does community factor into purpose or fulfillment?
Well, I mean, first thing that comes to mind is what just happened right here, right now. Like, relatability. Just to know I'm not the only one who feels that pain. Like, if we were surrounded by a group of people who are like, oh yeah, you should hear my story. Well, it just feels better to know I'm not the only one who feels like I'm messing up here and there. And so that's the first thing, just like not feeling alone in this thing. It's a unique cocktail having all those responsibilities. Your employees that you make sure they get a paycheck every week or every month. They don't have those same concerns. So you get yourself around a group of like-minded CEOs, business owners that are going through similar things. That just feels good to have that camaraderie. And then when you get to a place of vulnerability, and that's another thing, there's a world out there, culture, society, whatever, that is an Instagram culture, right? You got to make it look good, right? It's got to look good on the surface. So where is it that I can be authentic and take the mask down and just like can I just be for a second? Can I just be present and be vulnerable and be known and be accepted with my vulnerability? And there's where you really that's hard to find. But when you get that, well, that's where the magic happens. And so you have, like Patrick, I might say, hey, if we're in a community together or mastermind or something, some kind of group where we're able to go deep, I might tell you, and this is something I'm intentional about with people, my inner circle, I'll say, hey, I don't want anybody to tell me where my flaws are or when I'm out of line or when I need some accountability, but I trust you. And will you please be somebody who will love me enough to speak into this if you see me off the rails? And if you want, I'll do the same for you. I mean, I think that kind of community, people, especially CEOs, they're craving that. Like if you say, hey, would you like one of these? They're like, yes, that's what I need. Right. So yeah, that's what comes to mind on community.
So then how do you advise or help CEOs or anybody in this situation start to build that? Vulnerability isn't certainly something I show up with immediately. So how do you help people create and practice that?
Yeah, I mean, I think as somebody who facilitates mastermind groups, I think there's a science to it. There's a process to it, but I think kind of having that insider information. You can do things like team building. You can do things like a group that I just ran a couple weeks ago, we did what's called a lifeline exercise. You might be familiar with this, and it's basically and this is something you can do if you're in a small group or you're intending to start a group. A good icebreaker is just say, okay, here's a basic, when I was born to present, and then a line, of years or decades between, and here's a high point, here's a low point, and just kind of chart on this little simple graph, high points and low points through your life, and take a couple minutes to do that, and then share with the group. Okay, here's the time where I had my first girlfriend. Here's the time where I got beat up on the playground. And you go through your childhood, and then you go, oh, this is a high point. This is when I got married, and this is a high point. This is when my first child. And this is a low point when my wife left me. And you break through pretty quick. And for some reason, there's just using that little tool helps you kind of break through. Now, people still hold back on that, right? But that's a step in the right direction. Like there's some intentional processes that we can use to go deeper.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So someone talks to you, Scott. Maybe they're running a business. Maybe they're running a business out of their home. Maybe, they're achieving some success, like they're growing, they've reached a goal. And you see that there's a vacuum, that it's all about hard work, and there's something missing. Is there another tool that you might offer to help someone see that for themselves?
Yeah. So the thing I do most often when I first start with a client is do a life wheel exercise, or a wheel of life, and it's basically it's a measuring between a scale of 0 and 10 different areas of your life. So you're going to look at your business, you're going to look at your financials, your balance sheet, cash flow, whatever. You're also going to look at your marriage. You're going to look at your relationship with your kids. You're going to look at your other trusted relationships, that peer group, your health and fitness, your hobbies. You look at all of those things on one piece, on one picture, a 360-degree circle, and you kind of color that in. And what I like about it is you could just jot down on a piece of paper, oh, that's a 5 out of 10, that's an 8 out of 10. But when you do it on this picture, basically, you see the bumps in it. Like, you imagine if this was a wheel on my car, this would be a really bumpy ride. No wonder I feel a little bit stressed out at the end of the day. And that's going to, speak to your right brain, not just your left brain. Your right brain is going to connect with your left brain and say, okay, we got some work to do. And invariably, and I don't care. I mean, I think best practice, you do this thing once a quarter, at least once a year. So anybody who's done one and say, oh, I know what that is. Well, I encourage you, do it again. If it's been more than a year, do it again and take a snapshot of where you're at on your wheel of life. And it's going to show you, every time I do it, like I said, invariably somebody looks at that and they're like, oh, I kind of knew stuff was off, but now it looks, when I see this picture of my life, it's so clear to me what I need to do now. And then that clarity you can take and, do some more with, you can run with that.
Mm-hmm. So, we're kind of post-pandemic right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that a lot of people stopped doing what they were doing and started doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of people who've been nurses as an example, or a next door neighbor who's a teacher, and it's no longer fulfilling. It's a grind right now.
Gotcha.
And he talks to me about that. It's a grind. He's, if I use him as an example, he's pretty clear in terms of the purposeful fulfillment that he felt that drew him into teaching. But sometimes it's kind of reversed. The achievement, everything shifted, and now it's not as fulfilling. But he still has that clear purpose that brought him into teaching in the first place. And that actually happened to me. My first career, I taught kindergarten for 10 years. But as we had 3-4 kids, I couldn't financially afford to stay in teaching, but I loved it. And it took quite a while to kind of find that purposefulness in the work that we all do. Right. And the opportunity to be financially stable with a tribe of kids in the house. But, what are you seeing post-pandemic? Are there any trends that you're noticing that could be helpful for other people listening to identify, either personally or even in the maybe the difference in generations of the people that work in their organization?
Well, what actually comes to mind, and I don't know if it's necessarily tied to this era that we're in, but but I think it's certainly applicable to this time, that what you do, career and living out that purpose, are not necessarily the same thing. Again, like fulfillment and achievement are not the same rail. I think career or title and your purpose on this planet is not the same thing. So to your example, you weren't born with the purpose of being a kindergarten teacher. Your gift, skills, and abilities came out in the vocation of kindergarten teaching. But I bet you, if we look at it, we could see a commonality between your kindergarten years and what you're doing now is the same gift set that's coming out. When you're in your zone, it's coming out, whether you're a kindergarten teacher or working with CEOs and consulting and all that. So I think anybody who's like the nurse, look at re-examine those gift, skills, and abilities. The role that you were in before, if it's gone or doesn't exist, I think it can be very helpful to just take those blinders off and say, okay, what if, ask a really weird question like, what if I had to make 10 times as much money as I did in that previous profession? Or what if I had to make the same amount of money, but in a totally different role? Ask some questions that just are like, blow the lid off of your construct of thinking that you're currently having, and see where that question takes you. And then again with the foundation of, I've got these gifts. My purpose is evidenced in my design. The clues are there. I know that this is a clock. I know that it's got a design, and then see where that question takes you.
It's it's interesting because, and again, we're really aligned in so many ways. What I'm hearing is my purpose is you said it's in the design. Like I should be able to see my giftings. I often refer to it as my toolbox. This is my toolbox. This is, these are my tools. And peace comes from knowing what tools are in there and what tools are not. So I don't have to pretend to be something I'm not. All I have to do is show up with my toolbox and be really great at using my tools. That's it. Nothing. And certainly not hiding my tools because somebody else might have better tools or different tools. But what resonated with me about what you were just saying, you hear that? There are listeners, there are CEOs who say, my purpose is running this company, or my purpose is this company. Sometimes you hear parents say, my purpose is my children. And my challenge there is, it's very similar to what you said. It's like, well, I think you're using your toolbox, you're using your tools with your children, and you're going to use them running this company. But your purpose isn't, I don't know, tell me if you disagree. I don't think my purpose is anyone else. It's maybe to impact everyone else with my toolbox. But God forbid, if my children were taken from me today, my purpose is not gone. I'm still called to show up with my toolbox in any situation that I encounter.
Yeah, no, I love that. Okay, so here's where it makes me think. So when you talked about your toolbox and realizing, okay, those are my tools, right? Those are if I'm meant to work with these tools, that's what I'm good at. There's certainty with that. And what I realized is, when you have, like, again, the symptoms of living out of alignment with your purpose are, stress, anxiety, and sleepless nights. So of course you would have those symptoms if there was uncertainty, right? So the uncertainty is you're trying to fulfill a role, or you're trying to be someone you're not, right? You're trying to act like the clock's trying to act like art when it's actually a clock, right? So when you take a look at that toolbox and you're saying, okay, what are these gifts? What are these gifts, skills, and abilities that are inherent to me that just come natural? And get clear, get certain about, I can be the best in the world at being that. And there's certainty with that. And I think, that flow and that passion comes out of that. So like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited that I can be the best in the world at this. When the stress, anxiety, and sleepless nights comes from, I'm an imposter. Like, I don't think I can do this. Like, I feel so out of sorts. I'm not connected to this. Because you're using somebody else's tools.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. And that ties into health and wellness, right? Because whenever I've been in that situation, I start to notice that, I get worn down. I'm not using my own toolkit. I'm using somebody else's toolkit that maybe is considered to be part of my job. But going into health and wellness, I remember a time when I was in a room and doing some team building work. And being observant, I noticed that every single person, there were 12 people on that team, were sitting in their chairs, and their stomachs were actually right up against the table. And we were talking about what did we have in common. And it was I guess a risk, but we had a pretty good relationship built. And I asked, so what binds this team together? What do we have in common? And there was not a response. It was kind of quiet and a moment of silence. And I said, well, I can see one thing we have in common. And they all looked, and I said, every single stomach sitting in a chair here is touching the table. And we had enough trust in each other that actually, became something that people laughed about and then took seriously. And we started a conversation about how, no matter how good we might be, if we're not healthy, what is that going to do in terms of fulfilling our purpose? So I see that in your awakening work, that health and fitness is one of the pieces, on the wheel, but also that you do work in that area. How do you bring that up when your people in your mastermind group are talking about a whole lot of things, talking around the circle of I don't exercise anymore.
Yeah.
Or I'm not healthy, or they're visibly, you can see there's something going on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what I talk about, the good to great readers will appreciate my hedgehog concept is the 4 pillars of fulfillment. So again, it's all about fulfillment, right? So the 4 pillars of fulfillment, then it's kind of foundational on vitality. So I use the word vitality, which includes health and fitness. It includes energy management. It includes, sleep and nutrition and, flexibility and virility and all those things. So, you have your desire to make an impact on the world. So in between, so we've got these 4 pillars, the foundational being vitality and the pinnacle one being impact. I always get people who are trying to make an impact on this planet, right? They want to make growth and contribution part of what is the makeup of their business, their life, their legacy. So you want to make an impact, right? Cool. So if you want to make an impact, you have to have the other pillar of freedom. You have to be able to bring freedom out of yourself in your situation, whether it's financial freedom, location freedom, freedom from your own hindrances, those thoughts, those demons, those things in that closet that you just need to deal with so that you can be the best version of yourself. If you aren't the best version of yourself, you don't have that absolute freedom, you can't make as great of an impact as you would otherwise. So there's the impacts, the top, then you've got foundational of that is freedom, and then foundational of that is relationships, because I don't care what's going on. If your relationships are strained, everything else is going to fall apart. Like Patrick was saying, oh, I got to leave work because I forgot wife's birthday. Relationships is going to trump that no matter what impact you're trying to make on that day. So you got to have those relationships. But under the whole thing, the vitality, if you don't have the energy, the strength, the stamina to make all of that happen, I mean, that's one thing I learned when I had my most challenging time in my relationship was it takes energy. Like I got to have the intention to make this relationship work. It takes a lot of energy. I got to show up. I got to bring my physiology to this relationship. And so vitality is paramount. And when I kind of explain that, people are like, okay, yeah, you got me. I could probably do a little bit better on the vitality, right? So then we look at morning routines and we look at, okay, what are you doing to make sure that you have the longevity to live out this, legacy impact you want to make? And then we get into, the specifics of that. Where are the holes in your boat, so to speak?
Scout, bringing it back to our listener, the CEO, we've been talking a lot, I think, to the CEO about living a purpose, understanding the difference between achievement and fulfillment. How about for the CEO who's accountable, responsible for an organization of people? How do you coach a CEO to not just do this for her or himself, but to bring fulfillment and purpose to their people?
Yeah. So, as Leb said in the opening, like I consider myself an expert in relationship intelligence. And the reason why I think that is because, just again, it's been something I've assessed about, but I teach people a communication style I call needs-focused communication. And so it's based on, Tony Robbins has the 6 human needs, right? So it's based on a very basic understanding of every human behavior is connected to trying to get some needs met. And if you just take the 4 basic ones of certainty, uncertainty, significance, and connection, whatever your employees are doing, whether good behavior or ineffective behavior, is connected to they're trying to get their need for certainty or variety or significance or connection met. There's also the other 2 are growth and contribution, but those 4 basic ones is all it requires to have a needs-focused communication. So again, borrow again from Jim Collins, I think that's where we talked about getting the right people on the bus and making sure that people are in the right seats on the bus, right? So if you kind of take those two concepts, and this whole purpose focus thing, like each one of those people on the bus has their own gifts, skills, and abilities. They're living out their own purpose, and there's no reason why they can't be absolutely fulfilled within your company. But if they're in the wrong seat, they're the seat that requires the other guy's toolbox, and they want to use their own toolbox. That's where that connection to purpose is going to find. So I would say, apply this stuff to yourself. Have deep conversations with your employees. Maybe it's quarterly reviews or whatever, about what their purpose is, what gets them excited. If they're not happy and fulfilled while working with you, and you can't find a seat on the bus that would be an ideal fit for them, first of all, I would say many times there is, so don't be afraid of that. But if at the end of the day, you're like, oh my gosh, there's no seat on this bus that fits who you are, and I love you too much to hold on to you, like, let me help you. Let me help launch you into what would be absolutely fulfilling to you. It takes a special heart-centered CEO to have that conversation. If you're only about the bottom line, don't pass go. But if you really want to help people get the most out of this life, those people that are on your team, have that conversation fearlessly. 9 times out of 10, they're going to light up and be even more excited about coming to work. Or if they weren't excited before, they're going to be excited now, and because you're connecting their purpose. And I kind of touched on that needs focused communication. Find out what their purpose is. Find out what need they're most trying to get met. Whether that be, a lot of times, significance and connection. Obviously, certainty comes from getting a paycheck, right? If they're not getting paid well, they're going to be, missing on the certainty. As long as they're getting that, and there's a little bit of fun, they're getting that variety. Significance and connection. If you can make them feel important, which, hello, if you have that conversation with them, they're going to feel significant and they're going to feel connected. They're going to think you're the best boss ever. So if you can get somebody to have all those needs met, all 4 of those, certainty, variety, significance, connection, Tony Robbins says it this way. He says, it's an addiction. Like anything that's an addiction is meeting all those needs. Like you become like, I'm obsessed with it, right? I got to have this. What kind of boss or CEO doesn't want to have people that just are obsessed to come to work, right?
And not only that, but I think we've talked a lot about this. Today's the younger millennials and Gen Z they're not only wanting it, they're demanding it. Yeah. And so if you're the CEO who can engage them in that conversation, check those 4 boxes, you're going to win the war for talent. So there is a bottom line to all of this, but it's not like that. To me, the bottom line is collateral damage. It's like you're not doing it for that. That's just the payoff.
Well said.
Mm-hmm. Scott, does your wife work with you in some of this work? Can you talk to our listeners about what that might look like?
Yeah. So most of the people that I work with, if not all of them, are married. There's a few exceptions, but married with kids at home. There's again some exceptions to that, but my wife and I are our own avatar, right? So we've been married, more than a couple decades, and high school sweethearts. We've got a college kid, a junior high kid, and a high school kid. And so we're right in the middle of, and we've got multiple businesses. Right in the middle of it, this, we can relate to that client that we typically talk to. So when it comes to cognitive things, like I deal mostly with thoughts and feelings and actions and behaviors, right? And not that she doesn't, but her specialty is in the body. She's been a health and fitness coach for 10 plus years. She's nutrition certified. She's also taken some training in, sexuality coaching from somatic perspective. So when it comes to working with clients who are married, these things come up. I need some help with my health and fitness. I need some help with nutrition. I need some help with the sexuality of our relationship. If it comes to communication, I'm usually handling it. If it comes to sexuality, I'm usually bringing her in. So we have this kind of tag team, and our clients, they just know that they get the whole package. But she kind of has that specialty. So she's sort of, it's probably like 80-90% me, and then she's on for special assignments.
Thank you.
But that said, she does have her health and fitness business that is exclusively just that. So,
okay. Wow. So awakening. A lot of this is about waking up, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's my, you want to know my purpose is to wake people up to the fullness of freedom so they can live their best life. So, waking people up is, we are surrounded by, in our world today, a bunch of zombies going through the motions. I was one of them. I'm a recovering one, right? And that means that you're not being intentional about these 4 pillars of fulfillment. That means that you're not being aware of what's going on within yourself and what's going on within your most important relationships. So my purpose, that what gets me out of bed in the morning, is to help people discover that kind of awakening. So I'm a waker upper, that's who I am.
Well, just looking at the clock. Go ahead.
I got one more question. Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
So if I think holistically about the 4 pillars, I also think, I'm just talking to think right now, that to some degree, they're separate. There's this thing I can do, to help me with my vitality. There's this thing I can do to free my mind up around and, get rid of some of the self-limiting thoughts. There's this thing I can do around relationships, and I'm, I want to have an impact. And then, you mentioned 2 things that I don't know, and it's come up, certainly for me working with people, where it is componentized. And so it's like, I'm really passionate spiritually, but I don't want to bring it to work, or I can't bring it to work, or I'm really passionate about, intimacy and, sexuality and gender and all these kind of things are there, but I'm not sure, like how do I, what can I do with that? And so I componentize it. But you're talking about kind of these 4 pillars and living this really fullness in life. And, there are kind of some, it seems like it's changing, but, let's say if I look at it from vitality, my spiritual life gives me a lot of energy and vitality. And I can draw from that and bring it subtly into my work, but I can't do it overtly all the time. So is there anything you can share, with our listeners who are saying, maybe I'm high on 2 pillars and I can relate to that with work, but the other 2 seem off to me. Like you talked about it. There's a spiritual piece in sexuality, and it's just not often in the conversation.
Yeah. So I would go with another hierarchy. Foundationally, what you're talking about is, the spiritual, the highest level, the things that are most probably personal to us, right? If that's the highest level. In between that and relationships is, your values, your core values. I think that informs how you see the spiritual. But if we build everything on relationships, because what's the street corner preacher do that kind of violates an unwritten rule. They like throw it in your face, like you should think this way, and if you don't, you're going to hell, right? So that's the street corner preacher. Well, where's the relationship in that? So I always think about, okay, I want to be the opposite of that. So in my workplace, any place where I want to make an impact, again, I'm an impact-minded CEO or whatever, right? So and I maybe have these strong values, and I think I have a in my awakening, I've got these ideals that make sense that I would love to share with other people, but I don't come with that. Like I'm doing that with you guys, right? Because you're asking the questions, but I don't do that without relationship first. So
Sure.
At work, in whatever community I'm in, I lead with the relationship. So I just keep that hierarchy in mind: relationships, then values. If you want to know my values, we can talk about it. If you want to know my thoughts on spiritual things or sexuality or very intimate things, we can talk about it. But there's sort of that hierarchy. I don't lead with the other thing. I lead with the relationship. And if we've got this rapport built, and I just trust that we build enough rapport and vulnerability and that trust, then we can have those conversations. Or there may be a time where I see, the tragedy comes up, a health thing or a relationship thing or natural disaster. Hey, what comforts me is this, but I wouldn't do that without having a relationship with you first. Does that answer your question, Lynn?
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, no, I totally get that. And it led me to think of when the pandemic first opened up, and we're working with leaders, and one of the realities was we're not going to be together in the same office, right? It just wasn't possible. And some communications were very fear-based. You're gonna have to, we're gonna track everything you do on the computer. You're gonna wake up at 8, you're gonna clock out at 9, but people had kids at home, and I mean, all these things were happening. And but from a relational perspective, we would ask them to think of it differently, right? And every individual situation might be different. So they had to really create the relationship maybe at a deeper level than it was when everybody came into the office to, help their people meet their needs and do their work, make their contribution. So I think that, that's really great guidance for our listeners to, lead with relationship, and then other things fall into place. Yeah. So I very much agree and resonate with that.
Awesome.
Patsy, Leb, any final questions before we turn the corner and start talking about getting practical?
I'm good to go.
I am too. You,
Excellent.
Patrick?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
good. Okay. So listener, from every episode, this is the part of the show where we like to give you key takeaways, key points from today's episode, or maybe things we didn't cover that we should have, Scott. So free reign. Doesn't have to just be limited to what we talked about today, but what are some practical steps or things that a leader can implement starting today in his or her relationships or his or her business to start making inroads, living more fulfillment, or living out your purpose?
So you're asking me?
Yeah, we'll start with you. We always let our guests go first, so we don't take all the good ones.
Okay.
So we'll let you go first, and then we'll. So yeah, what comes to mind for you?
Okay. Well, I mean, I have a couple of free resources I'd love to offer. 2 different websites. One is, we talked about the Life Wheel. You can go to wheel.awakenlife.com. And you can get the Life Wheel exercise. I actually call it the Total Freedom Life Wheel exercise, because after you do that Life Wheel, you go into asking the why behind that. So what would make me successful if I look at that Life Wheel? And you, like I mentioned earlier, it just kind of pops out of the page. You're like, oh, okay, now I know what I need to do. You kind of create a goal around that. And then you ask yourself why several times through this worksheet, the download. And Yeah, and so I think that's a really practical thing. The other thing that I would love to offer is if you go to awakenlife.cc, I have a purpose challenge. It helps you define your purpose. So if you're thinking, this is great, but I've been trying to figure out what my purpose is forever, and maybe a couple of thoughts resonated, you're going to find a kind of a step-by-step walkthrough in like a 5-day challenge.
Cool.
That's at awakenlife.cc.
Excellent. Good. Very practical.
Yeah. Step by step.
Well, that's why we do this, because as we like to say, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So, so okay, do those. Anything else, Scott, before we all jump in?
Well, maybe I'll think of something later.
Okay,
but
yeah, we'll circle back. How's that? Okay, Patsy or Lev, who wants to go?
I can go.
Go for
Go
it.
ahead, Betsy.
It's been the theme of the day. Don't go it alone. Build your community. And let's see, what was the other one? Oh, ask who am I versus what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
These are really simple but profound. So I love that.
Yep.
I don't want to take them all, but my purpose is my design, my unique design. And as Patrick said, the specific tools in my toolbox. So I'll stop there.
Okay.
There's some more good ones, but I'll leave them for you guys.
Okay. Lev, you want to go or you want me to go?
Okay. I'll give you a few and try to limit it enough that you'll jump right in.
Okay.
One is that looking good isn't the greatest metric for success. And, with Instagram and everything else that Scott mentioned, this can be a lot of focus on how I look as opposed to who I am. And another is have authentic conversations with your people about their purpose. Just take the time. And it's, tied to leading with relationship. And that was another one for me that really resonated is leading with relationship works. Everything else kind of works or builds upon that. So lead with relationship. I have more, but I'm going to pass it to you, Patrick.
All right. Cool. Boy, you got, yeah. You took a lot of them. That's good. This one was taken. So, Scott, I liked what you said, because we're always looking for signs, right? So you said stress, anxiety, sleepless nights. These are signs that you're likely out of alignment. And so pay attention to those signs before things blow up. So maybe start thinking about getting into alignment before you find yourself so out of whack. Talked about community. Here I have, I liked that whole conversation, the points you were making, that your career and title are separate. They're different from purpose. They're not the same thing. The purpose is who you are. Career or title is what you do with it. And to your point, you likely do that purpose. You do your purpose everywhere you go. So if a lot of us get tied up into my job is my purpose, which is problematic if my job goes away. Well, then what do I do? No. Wherever you go next, that's where you'll do your purpose. So I thought that was insightful. I love the idea of practicing needs-focused communication, right? And you hit them. You said certainty, variety, significance, and connection. That if you're making sure to check those boxes, then the other person in the conversation will walk away feeling heard and seen and fulfilled. And that's what you're looking for if you're in a leadership position. That's what you'd be looking for in any relationship, but it's especially helpful in a leadership position. So I'll pause there because I think, I don't know, let's circle back around. Any others anybody wants to add?
When Leb was talking about relationships, is it just things that we already talked about, or can I add a new?
Absolutely. It's our show. We can do whatever the hell we want.
Good. Well, yeah, when you were talking about relationships, Leb, it reminded me, that, Jesus said this thing that was profound, that all of the law, basically everything written in the Bible, can be summarized in love God, but then love your neighbor as yourself. So he gave those two things separately, but he said the second one, love your neighbor as yourself. To me, that whenever I need a little guidance, like a practical step, practical tool, like, okay, how do I do relationship well? Just love that person. And we don't do a very good job of loving ourselves in this society. So that's why vitality is important. You got to look at, okay, what's this life wheel saying? Where am I out of balance? Where do I need to shore up? How can I love myself? Put my own air mask on, right, before I put it on somebody else. And then love the people around me as well as I'm loving myself. But there's an order to that, right? So anyways, that's just something that guides my ability to like discern what way to go with relationships.
It's beautiful.
Right. Yes.
Excellent. Not much to say after that.
Yeah. Nope. Okay. Good. Well then, Scott, thank you for joining us today. Great stuff. I know that our listener can benefit from what we were talking about. So we always like to make sure that we're letting them know how they can contact you, that we're highlighting you. First of all, you have your own podcast, do you not?
Yeah. So the Awakened Life with Scott Landis podcast. And
Okay.
I similarly, I interview, purpose-focused entrepreneurs just about their life, and it goes all over the place.
Yeah. Okay. So listener, you can check that out, find that in podcast libraries. Scott, so you've already given the websites for the Life Wheel and the other exercise, the helping discover your purpose. If somebody's interested in contacting you directly, or what's the best way for them to do that?
You can reach me. My email is scott@landis360.com. And that's a good way to go. Also, if you want to get connected with me, and I do a once a month, just like, let's get some business leaders together. You can come meet me and hang out with me and other business leaders in person in a community. You can register for that at ceo.awakenlife.com.
Excellent.
And then I can't wait to meet you there.
And I'm guessing you have a LinkedIn as well. So if anyone wants to connect with you there, they can do. Okay, excellent. Yeah, listener, as we say every week, please connect with any of us, our guests, connect with Leb and Patsy as well. We'd love to grow our network by connecting with you. And then if you are interested in being on a future episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast, by all means, let us know. You can contact us through our website at thefrustratedceo.com, which is also where you can find this episode's Let's Get Practical. So that thing we just talked through, you can download it and find all other episodes, Let's Get Practicals. So we encourage you to go there. You can listen to previous episodes. Check in, let us know what you like, what you don't. I think that's it. Anything else for the good of the cause, Leb or Patsy or Scott?
No, just thank you, Scott.
Yes.
Yep. Greatly appreciate your time.
Guys.
Scott, thank you. This is inspiring for us, so I know it will be inspiring for our listeners. So that's it. Listener, thank you for sticking with us to the end of another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast, and we will see you again next time.